gotta do what I gotta do.
Hello and welcome to episode 9 of the MMA Rundown podcast. My name is Ben Gordon. I'll be your host once again. This week we're going to be going over the event in Nashville, UFC Nashville on FS1. I'll be going in depth on the final 4 fights in the main card, and then also recapping the rest of the card, and then as far as like the rest of the main card and the other fights on there. Also be talking about Frank Mir and his steroid suspension, and a couple other big stories that are going on in MMA now. Unfortunately, the UFC is not going to have another event for a few weeks. That'll be UFC 211, so not a whole lot to preview, but a good amount of stuff to recap this week. And to start off, we'll be looking at Cub Swanson against Artem Lobov. Now, this was a fight where when I was going through my preview last week, I was saying Artem really doesn't deserve to be in this fight. He talked his way into it, and good on Artem for doing that. He got himself good exposure in the main event, and even in this loss, you'd probably say it's a good loss for him. He performed pretty well. He won the first round on a couple of the judges' scorecards. I gave him the first round as well. So not the worst fight for Artem. And the thing that I was saying is, if Cub's going to win this fight, he could use his grappling and have a huge advantage, or he could keep this fight standing where he's still the better fighter and give Artem a better chance, because Artem's mostly a stand-up fighter. He's okay grappling. He's a decent defensive grappler, not a great offensive grappler. And this fight really showed that. When they were on the feet in the first round, Artem came out really strong, was able to get the better of him, although it wasn't like overwhelming. But Cub made some adjustments, got better later on, but was also able to take Artem down multiple times, do some damage on the ground, but not really get to the point where he was really like passing him out and getting to a point where he's about to finish. But either way, if we're going to look at where these two fighters go from here, for Artem, you figure his next fight's going to be a good exposure fight too. If he's on a pay-per-view, it's probably going to be on a main card. If he's on FS1 or Fox, he could still potentially find himself, probably not in a main event again, but you'd be looking at a co-main event or a featured bout. So good for him in his career. As far as who he would get put up against, he's going to probably call out another guy who's hanging around the top 15 and get himself a big name fight. If you're the UFC, I don't really know that Artem's at a point where you feel like he's the kind of guy where you give him time and he's going to be able to build into a star. I think as far as his fighting goes, he'll get better, obviously, as he continues to train, but it's not like he's ever going to grow into a fighter where his skill set is a top 15 skill set, or that he's ever really going to make a run at the title. So he's the kind of guy you want to use for future bouts, and kind of use his name and his connection to Conor McGregor to help sell some lower level fights. So as far as names go for that, I don't know that I have anyone in particular. I mean, it seems like Artem's the kind of guy where he'll find someone to pick on and they'll get pissed off and say yes. So really for him, just keep finding feature bouts. Hopefully he'll keep finding bouts against guys who want to stand with him, because that's really where he's going to have the most exciting fights, and that's where he's going to have the best chance of pulling an upset too. For Cub, he's kind of in a weird spot where beating Artem really doesn't move him up any further than he already was. He was already number 4 in the division. Most of the guys who are ahead of him already hold victories over him. He had that 8-second knockout to Jose Aldo. Now, granted, that's been so long ago where if Cub actually did make a good run, you could say, okay, fine, that was so long ago and it was a bit of a fluke. Let's have a rematch. But that's not a fight that makes sense right now. Aldo has Holloway up next, and you'd have to wonder beyond that who'd be next for him. But again, that's further down the line. Max Holloway has a win over Cub Swanson, so again, the same type of thing there. That's a tough fight to sell again. Frankie Edgar was very dominant over Cub Swanson. I think Chad Mendes would be the one guy who Cub hasn't fought that's towards the top right now, but Chad Mendes is on a steroid suspension, so it doesn't seem like we'll be seeing him back anytime soon. So for Cub Swanson, it seems like he's going to kind of get stuck in a similar position where he's going to be fighting a guy who's ranked below him, in a position where when he wins, he's not really going to advance a whole lot, but if he loses, he could really fall back pretty far. And that's pretty unfortunate for him, but that's kind of the state of the division. So for him, I'd be looking at other guys who are in the top 10. As far as whether you want to get a guy who's up and coming and poses a great risk to you, or a guy who's kind of more established and have a bit of a slugfest, I don't know. You could look at a guy like Jeremy Stephens, for example, where Stephens, granted he's coming off of a loss, but he was ranked number 5 at the time. Good name there. That's a fight where you can definitely sell that as an exciting matchup. Again, Cubs, sometimes you'd like to see him use his jiu-jitsu a little bit more, use his grappling a little bit more, but you could see him going into a fight with Stephens and being willing to throw down, and that could be a really fun fight to watch. So for him, that's probably what I would imagine comes next, is a guy like a Jeremy Stephens, someone else who's in the top 10, where if he gets a win, you can still kind of say, hey, look, I'm beating the top guys, and maybe everything else sorts itself out. The loser of the Holloway and Aldo fight, maybe they kind of get brushed away, and it gives Cub a little bit of space where if he can get a couple of big wins, he might find himself in the title picture. Again, there's the Yair versus Frankie fight too, depending on how Yair does. Now, granted, Yair's worked with Greg Jackson's, so I'm not entirely sure if Cub and Yair would ever end up fighting because of that, or what the status is with that. Obviously, BJ Penn was supposedly working with Jackson's too, and Yair and BJ fought. So that could be a little bit odd, but that'd be an exciting fight as well. But only time will tell on this one. Hopefully Lobov gets another guy who's got a decent name for him, and he can kind of work his way a little higher up on the card than he probably deserves skill-wise. And for Cub, a fight like Jeremy Stephens or against another top-ranked featherweight is probably going to be what's best for him at this point.